Hello there, my sleep fellows. Tonight, I have a special tale to share, one whispered about in the quiet corners of Hogwarts when the castle sleeps and the corridors hum with their own kind of magic. You've surely heard of the moving staircases, haven't you? The ones that shift mid-step, turning an innocent climb into a detour through forgotten halls or a tumble into a different floor entirely. But what if I told you that some steps simply disappear, not move, not shift, but vanish? What if, late at night, a student puts one foot forward and it slips into a space that wasn't there before? No need to worry, though. Tonight's story unfolds gently, like the soft flutter of owl wings in the dark, or the hush of wind curling along the castle walls. It's not a tale of fright, but of mystery wrapped in candlelight. You are safe here, cozy, and let the world around you fade, and imagine the soft warmth of a thick quilt pulled up to your chin, the gentle crackling of a fireplace not far away. You're not alone. Harry, Hermione, and Ron are nearby, and so are the twinkling stars outside the ancient stone windows of the castle. Tonight's story begins not in a moment of fear, but in wonder. A question that has lingered for centuries within the stones of Hogwarts. Why do some steps disappear without warning? As we drift into this tale, picture yourself walking through the castle after hours, maybe with a cloak wrapped tightly around your shoulders. The halls are quiet, but never silent. The portraits are snoring gently, the tapestries rustling as if they too dream of distant lands. Somewhere, the soft clink of Peeves's distant prank echoes and vanishes. But here, in this quiet stretch of corridor, nothing stirs except the stairs. Before we begin, if you enjoy these magical bedtime tales, you're most welcome to follow along. Perhaps even hit the little star or bell so you don't miss the next whisper of Hogwarts magic. No pressure, only if your heart feels like it. Now, sink deeper into your pillow, breathe slowly, and let the golden glow of lanterns guide us through the castle gates. Hogwarts is waiting, as it always has, quietly breathing magic through its walls. And the staircases, well, they're watching too, but not in a way that should worry you, just observing, curious really, much like you. Our journey begins with a quiet evening and a few curious footsteps on a staircase that may or may not still be there. Are you ready? Then come along, sleep fellow. Let's step gently into the heart of a mystery where the stars twinkle above the astronomy tower and even the staircases have secrets to tell. In the heart of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where enchanted suits of armor polished themselves and portraits offered sleepy nods to passers-by, one student wandered with a bit more curiosity than the rest. Her name was Luna Lovegood. With her silvery blonde hair flowing like moonlight and eyes wide with wonder, Luna had always walked the halls of Hogwarts a little differently. Where others rushed to class, she paused to gaze up at the shifting stonework. While her friends sat in the library buried in books, Luna tilted her head to listen to the hum of the castle itself, convinced it had a voice of its own. It was a quiet Saturday evening, just after supper in the Great Hall. Most students had retreated to their common rooms, some to play wizard chess, others to finish last-minute essays with inky quills scratching hurriedly. But Luna was in no hurry. She had just finished sipping her favorite cup of piping hot elderflower tea and slipped away unnoticed, cradling a small pouch of dried nettle leaves in her robe pocket. Not for a potion, just because she liked the smell. Tonight, she wasn't alone. Trailing behind her, just a few steps behind and yawning with every third footfall, was Neville Longbottom. His cardigan sleeves were too long again, and he kept pushing them up with the back of his hand as he clutched a small, potted Mimbulus Mimbletonia. Its leaves twitched sleepily every now and then. "I don't know why we need to walk tonight," Neville mumbled, adjusting his hold on the plant. "Couldn't we look for disappearing stairs tomorrow? Or perhaps never?" Luna smiled, not slowing her pace. "The stairs don't disappear when they're expected to. That's part of the enchantment." Neville sighed, but there was no real complaint in it. He had grown fond of Luna's odd habits. After all, they had both learned the value of a little bravery in unexpected places. And besides, there was something unusually peaceful about walking Hogwarts with her, especially at night. They passed a few familiar places as they moved along the corridor, the large tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy trying to teach trolls ballet, and the warm glow of a torch flickering beside a worn wooden bench. "Do you think they vanished to hide something?" Neville asked quietly. "The stairs?" Luna tilted her head. "No, I think they vanish because they're shy." Neville blinked. "Shy?" "Yes," Luna said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "They only want to be stepped on when no one is looking." Like Nargles, Neville smiled despite himself. Being with Luna was like being wrapped in a peculiar dream, one where logic took a nap and imagination came out to play. Together, they padded further into the castle's quiet heart, the stone floors cool beneath their shoes, and the lanterns casting sleepy shadows. The castle welcomed them as it always had, its staircases whispering old secrets in the dark, just waiting to be noticed. And soon enough, one of them would be. The castle was unusually hushed that evening, the sort of hush that cradled the stone walls like an old lullaby. Candles floating in their brackets flickered gently, casting golden glows that danced across the floor like soft, sleepy fireflies. Outside the windows, the sky had slipped into a velvet indigo, and the moon, round and quiet, watched from above, high above the towers of Hogwarts. Luna and Neville walked side by side along the third-floor corridor, their footsteps the only sound, except for the occasional flutter of a ghost brushing past in the distance. Neville's fingers gently stroked the rim of his plant's pot, while Luna held a folded bit of parchment in her hand, a hand-drawn map she had scribbled during arithmancy, complete with swirling doodles of staircases with faces and eyes that blinked. "You've mapped the stairs?" Neville asked, peering over her shoulder. "I've mapped the ones that don't like being mapped," Luna said softly, her eyes dreamy but sharp. "They're a bit offended, really." "I promised them it's just for friendship." Neville gave a small laugh. "Right. Of course. Friends with the stairs." They turned left at a narrow corner where a portrait of a dozing wizard with a telescope yawned and muttered, "About time someone noticed the stars tonight." The stairwell they approached was one of the older ones, stone steps worn smooth by 1,000 years of students in various states of hurry, each with parchment flapping and cloaks trailing behind them. But now, in the quiet hour just before curfew, the stairwell stood solemn and silent, lit by a single torch at the top landing. Luna stopped. "There," she whispered. Neville squinted. "What?" "One of them is watching," she said. Neville tilted his head, unsure whether to be amused or genuinely unsettled, but Luna crouched low, her face close to the step near the base. She brushed a fingertip across the cold stone. It felt ordinary. Then, a sound, soft, faint, like a small click. The 7th step shimmered, just a ripple, like heat over summer pavement, and then vanished, gone. One moment there. The next, nothing but air. Neville stumbled back with a gasp. Blimey! The torch above flickered once, then twice, and then held steady, as though nothing strange had just happened. Luna straightened up calmly. "They really are shy tonight." Neville leaned over the empty space where the step had been, careful not to lean too far. Below, only darkness met his gaze. Not a hole, not a gap, just an absence. "What happens if someone steps into it?" he asked quietly. "They fall," Luna replied, tilting her head, but not down. "They fall somewhere else." Neville stared at her. "You're not serious." "I'm always serious," she said in a soft voice, "just not always literal." Neville shivered despite the warmth of the torchlight. "Should we tell a professor?" Luna considered. "Maybe, but only if the stairs ask us to." Neville was about to argue, but Luna gently reached into her robe and pulled out a small silver bell, a delicate charm shaped like a feather, fastened to a string. She shook it gently, and the faintest sound echoed, not a chime, but something softer. A breath, a whisper from above them. The staircase trembled, not dramatically, just the slightest motion, as though it were waking up. Luna closed her eyes. They know we're listening. And then something even stranger happened. The step returned, right where it had been, without sound, without flash. One moment, there was a space, silent and unexplainable. The next, the stone step reappeared as if it had never left. Neville blinked hard and stepped back again, gripping his plant tighter. "I didn't imagine that, right?" he whispered. "No," Luna said. "They like you." Neville looked down. "The stairs?" "Mm-hmm," Luna replied, now walking up them one by one. "You don't question them too loudly." Neville followed cautiously, careful to skip the step that had vanished just in case. "Luna," he asked after a moment, "how long have you known they do this?" "Since 2nd year," she replied. "The first time I stayed behind after dinner and followed the humming." Neville blinked. "The humming?" Luna smiled. "You'll hear it if you stop thinking for long enough." Neville, who often found himself accidentally thinking too little or too much, tried hard to listen as they reached the top of the landing. He squinted into the dark stairwell behind them. There it was, a soft sound, barely audible, like a melody played on wind. Luna looked pleased. "You heard it." "I think so," Neville whispered. "Sort of." She nodded. "The staircases are alive, you know. not just enchanted, not like a broom or a bewitched plate. They remember things. They choose. That's why they shift. Neville leaned against the wall, still clutching his Mimbulus Mimbletonia, which gave a sleepy shudder. So, what do they want? I think they want to tell us something, Luna said, her voice even quieter now. Something old. Something even the professors have forgotten. Just then, a cool breeze brushed past them, not from a window, but from the direction of the stairs below. It wasn't just air, it carried a scent, something like rain-soaked parchment and candle wax, and something else, a touch of forgotten ink and old spellwork. Neville shivered. Come, Luna said softly. There's more. She turned and walked into a new passage Neville didn't recognize. It seemed to curve behind the main stairwell, tucked behind thick stone walls that looked older than the rest of the corridor. The torches here were dimmer, glowing with a soft bluish hue rather than gold. Their flames moved like slow-motion water, curling upward lazily. Neville followed, heart thudding quietly, not from fear, but from that gentle sort of suspense that comes from stepping into something you don't fully understand. They passed old portraits, empty frames mostly, the kind that hadn't held anyone in centuries, and then they found it. A door, small, unassuming, almost too narrow to notice. Carved into the wood was a single line of text, faintly glowing. Only the vanished may pass unseen. Luna tilted her head. Vanished. Neville touched the wood gently. It was warm. What do we do? He asked. Wait, Luna whispered. And so they waited, sitting cross-legged in the corridor, backs against the wall, letting the silence hold them. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time felt slower here, quieter, and then the step vanished again. Though they were far from the stairwell, they felt it, a soft vibration in the stone beneath them, a sigh in the air. The door clicked. Neville jumped slightly. The door creaked open, just a sliver. Luna stood slowly, her face lit with quiet wonder. I think it's an invitation. Neville swallowed, heart now beating a bit faster. And if it's not, then it's a very polite trap, Luna said, her voice still calm. She smiled, stepping forward. Neville hesitated only a moment before following, and with that, the door eased open, and the two students stepped gently into a room no one had entered in perhaps 100 years. The stone behind them shimmered shut once more. Somewhere behind them, on a staircase that wasn't quite where it used to be, a single step reappeared with a soft sigh, content, perhaps, that it had been noticed at last. The doorway behind Luna and Neville sealed with the softest whisper, like a sigh caught between pages of a book long forgotten. The corridor outside was gone now, and the room they had entered was unlike any place they had seen before within the walls of Hogwarts. It was neither grand like the Great Hall, nor secretive like the Room of Requirement. Instead, it felt still, old and untouched, yet not abandoned. The ceiling curved in a smooth dome overhead, carved with dozens of interlocking runes that pulsed faintly with blue light, like stars gently breathing. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of aged wood, candle wax, and something older, perhaps dust from 1,000 pages, or forgotten magic stirred back to life. A large circular floor mosaic stretched out beneath their feet, crafted of pale stone in the shape of a spiraling staircase. Luna stepped slowly toward it, her boots echoing in the otherwise silent chamber. Neville followed, his eyes drawn to the mural on the far wall. It depicted staircases, dozens of them, twisting, turning, floating, vanishing. Some led to open skies, some to shadowed doorways. One even disappeared into a pool of stars. And in the center of it all was a single glowing rune, a spiral surrounded by tiny footsteps. Neville tilted his head. What is this place? Luna knelt near the mosaic. I think it's where the vanished steps remember themselves. He blinked. You mean, they come back here? She nodded slowly. When they disappear, I don't think they stop existing. I think they return here, where they first learned how to move. Neville shivered slightly, looking around. The walls were covered in dusty shelves, though not with books. Each shelf held what looked like models of staircases, tiny replicas, miniature stone and wood, each resting on a small velvet base. Some were missing steps, others curled in impossible ways. One hovered slightly above its pedestal, turning slowly in place. Neville reached out to touch it, but Luna gently stopped him. Careful. These aren't models, they're memories. As if to confirm her words, the staircase in question gave a tiny shudder, then stopped spinning altogether. Neville withdrew his hand quickly, and then the second twist arrived. Not loudly, not suddenly, but with the same softness that had filled everything else so far, like a secret blooming in silence. In the far corner of the room, a whisper began. Not a voice exactly, more like an echo. Faint words, spoken long ago, looping back into the air. If a step disappears, it is because the path ahead has changed. The voice was old, tired, and kind. It repeated the phrase once more, as if etched into the magic of the room itself. Neville looked at Luna. Did you hear that? She nodded. It's a recording spell. Very old, probably cast by the person who built this room. They followed the sound, which now pulsed softly beneath their feet. As they approached, a small platform began to rise from the floor. Upon it sat an object that seemed oddly ordinary in this strange room. A student's shoe, but not just any shoe. Neville recognized the deep green trim and the careful embroidery of the house crest. That's a Slytherin shoe. Luna reached out and picked it up gently. Inside, tucked beneath the insole, was a folded bit of parchment. She unfolded it slowly and read aloud. The step did not abandon me. I followed where it led. If you are reading this, then the path still lives. Cassia Malkin, 1874. Neville stared. Cassia Malkin. Wasn't she the student who disappeared from Hogwarts? They said she ran away. Luna nodded slowly. Or perhaps the staircases took her. He shivered again, not from fear, but from the weight of the realization. They're not random, Neville, Luna said. They don't just vanish for fun. They choose. They lead, but where? He asked. And why? Before Luna could answer, the room stirred again. The mosaic at their feet began to glow more brightly, and suddenly, a faint outline of steps emerged in the center of the spiral. They shimmered with light, an invisible staircase revealing itself for only a moment. Luna stepped forward. "Luna, wait," Neville cried, but she turned and smiled gently. "I won't go far. I just want to see where it leads." She placed a foot on the glowing step, and it held. Then another appeared ahead of her, and another. Slowly, cautiously, she climbed just 5 or 6 steps into the air. From Neville's point of view, she looked as though she was walking into nothing. Her form grew faint, translucent. He could still see her, but it was like watching through a curtain of mist. Then she stopped. "Neville," she called softly, "come see." He swallowed hard, clutched his plant tight, and stepped onto the first glowing stair. A slight warmth pulsed beneath his foot. Solid, yes, but not stone. It felt like memory, like a dream given shape. He climbed after her, and then they were somewhere else. The light faded slowly, and they found themselves standing in a spiral chamber, not unlike the one below, but this one was filled with light. Not bright light, but soft, like dawn filtered through gauze. In the center stood a pedestal with an orb resting upon it. The orb shimmered with soft silver mist, swirling slowly inside. Luna approached first. "A memory sphere," she whispered. Neville frowned. "Not a pensieve?" She shook her head. "No, this is older. These store feelings, echoes of places, echoes of decisions." She reached out, fingers brushing the orb, and suddenly the chamber filled with sound. Not speech, but the feeling of choice. The weight of standing before 2 staircases and not knowing which to trust. The ache of being left behind by one that disappeared too soon. The fear of stepping onto nothing, and finally, the joy of trusting the unknown and being gently caught. Neville had never felt anything like it. The orb pulsed gently, then dimmed. Luna stepped back, her eyes slightly misty. The staircases aren't just paths. They're decisions. He looked at her, and they remember how they were chosen. Or not. "Yes," she whispered. "Every step holds a memory of someone's trust." Or someone's hesitation. Neville walked to the edge of the platform. "Luna, if these staircases hold echoes of every student who's walked them, then Hogwarts isn't just a school." Luna turned to him, her expression peaceful. "It's a living record of choices." The orb behind them pulsed once more, and this time the glowing steps appeared again, descending now, gently, like an exhale. They followed the path down, back through the spiral, back through the shimmering air. When their feet touched the mosaic room once more, the platform slowly lowered itself back into the floor, and the faint echo whispered again, "The path still lives." The door creaked open behind them, on its own this time. Neville and Luna stepped out into the corridor, now strangely warmer than before. The torches burned golden once again. The vanished stair, it had returned, and stood perfectly still. They looked at it for a long moment, the air thick with silence and understanding. Then Luna turned to Neville. "We should go back." He nodded, but as they walked, a faint shimmer followed behind them. The stairs didn't move, not this time. They simply glowed for just a moment, then stilled again, content perhaps that their story had been shared. The walk back to the familiar corridors of Hogwarts should have felt like a return to normalcy, But for Luna and Neville, something subtle had changed. The castle still hummed with its soft, living magic. The torches still flickered lazily on the walls. The portraits still dozed and snored, their frames gently creaking in rhythm with their dreamt adventures. But beneath it all, just beneath the surface, the quiet mystery of the staircases pulsed like a heartbeat. Neville glanced back over his shoulder as they walked through the third-floor corridor. The spiral staircase from earlier looked still, too still, not abandoned, but listening. Luna held the old Slytherin shoe in her hand, the note from Cassia Malkin now folded and tucked safely into her robe. She hadn't said much since they'd returned from the glowing chamber, but her dreamy expression had softened into something more thoughtful. Even her steps were quieter, more reverent. As they neared the portrait of the one-eyed witch, famous for her passage to honeydukes, Neville finally broke the silence. "Luna," he said gently, "do you think she's still here? Cassia?" He nodded. Luna paused in front of the portrait, pressing her fingers lightly to the cool stone wall. "I think pieces of her are." "You mean like a ghost?" Luna shook her head. "No, not like the Gray Lady or nearly headless Nick, more like echoes, choices that were never completed." Neville looked around. "So then, these staircases, they're holding those pieces?" She nodded again. Each one remembers a moment. A pause, a hesitation, a leap. They moved on, winding past the long windowed hall that overlooked the greenhouses, their panes now slick with evening dew. The stars glimmered faintly above the forbidden forest, casting silver light across the sleeping grounds. Neville, cradling his now dozing Mimbletonia, spoke again. "What if someone follows the wrong staircase? What if they disappear and don't come back?" "They don't disappear," Luna said softly. "They choose. And sometimes what's behind those choices is something not meant to be finished in one lifetime." Neville didn't quite understand, but he trusted Luna's voice. It wrapped around the words gently, like wool cushioning a secret. As they passed an alcove lined with suits of armor, one of the suits gave a sleepy snort, then returned to stillness. But in the echo of the metallic grunt, a soft tapping sound reached their ears. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't loud, it wasn't frantic, but it was steady and unusual for a place that should have been empty at this hour. Luna turned first. "That's not footsteps," she whispered. "That's invitation." Neville followed her around the corner, where an unfamiliar staircase curved upward into a narrow turret. Neville didn't remember being there. "This wasn't here before," he whispered. "It was," Luna said, "but not for everyone." The steps were thin and winding, the kind of staircase that felt like it belonged in a dream, each one lit softly underneath, as though remembering every foot that had ever touched it. They climbed slowly, quietly, the air growing cooler and sweeter with each level. At the top they reached a rounded door set into the stone, its knob shaped like a curled leaf. Luna hesitated, then placed the Slytherin shoe on the ground beside the door. The leaf-shaped knob turned on its own. The door creaked open. Inside was not a room, but a sort of gallery, a circular balcony overlooking what looked like an impossibly deep atrium. Instead of stairs or floors, Floating stone platforms hovered in the air, some close, others far, each gently rotating in silence. And on each platform stood a single object: a quill, a hairpin, a shoe, a wand, a small mirror, a torn page from a book, all simple things, but each one gently pulsed with its own glow. Neville stepped forward. "What is this place?" Luna's voice was barely audible. A room of forgotten intentions. He stared at her. "Forgotten?" She nodded every time someone stepped forward and then changed their mind. These things were left behind. Not lost, just... Paused, Neville moved to the edge of the balcony, peering down at the floating items. One in particular caught his eye, a familiar-looking pair of dragonhide gloves, worn and patched in several places. He leaned forward. "Those look like my mom's," Luna whispered, eyes wide. Neville turned to her. "Your mom? But she used to study here," Luna said. "She was always fascinated by staircases, thought they had secrets to share." Neville stepped closer to her. "Do you think she came here?" "I think," Luna said quietly, "that she once followed a disappearing step. And maybe she left something behind she never meant to forget." Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the railing. The gloves, as if sensing her gaze, drifted slowly upward, closer to the balcony. Neville didn't speak. The air in the room felt sacred, like the inside of a memory no one had dared open for years. The gloves came within arm's reach. Luna lifted her hand, but just as her fingers brushed the edge of the left glove, a soft voice whispered through the room, "Only when the step is chosen will the path continue." The gloves pulled away gently, drifting downward once more. Luna didn't chase them, she simply smiled. "She's waiting," she whispered, "but not yet. Not for me, not now." Neville placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded. "Better than ever." They turned away from the gallery, letting the door close behind them, leaving the quiet sanctuary of forgotten intentions behind. Back in the hallway, the steps of the turret slowly faded, literally disappeared, stone by stone, behind them. Neville's eyebrows rose. "That staircase is gone." "No," Luna said with a soft smile. "It's just remembering someone else now." As they returned to the third-floor corridor, they found themselves walking slower than before, half reluctant, half thoughtful. The castle no longer felt like it was made of stone and spellwork alone. It felt alive. They paused by the original staircase, the one that had first vanished. Neville tilted his head, watching the seventh step. "It's back," he said. "For now," Luna replied. "Do you think we'll ever see it vanish again?" "I hope so," she whispered. "It's how it says hello." And in that moment, the step shimmered, just a little, not vanishing, not quite, but just enough to acknowledge it had heard them, and maybe, just maybe, it had remembered them too. The morning after their quiet adventure, the castle of Hogwarts seemed to stretch and blink in the early light, as though nothing at all had changed. The sun streamed through the tall arched windows of the great hall, spilling golden light across breakfast tables and bowls of porridge. Students chatted lazily over toast and pumpkin juice, oblivious to the staircases that had shifted quietly in the night. One step disappearing, another reappearing, all with the gentle rhythm of something breathing just beneath the surface of stone. Luna sat at the Ravenclaw table, swirling her spoon slowly through a bowl of stewed plums, her mind elsewhere. Her gaze drifted toward the enchanted ceiling, where soft clouds floated like silent ships across the morning sky. Across the room, Neville caught her eye from the Gryffindor table and gave a small smile. He, too, hadn't slept much. Though their feet had returned to familiar hallways, part of their thoughts remained back in that glowing gallery of forgotten intentions. The room of floating relics, the gloves, the memory orb, the voice that whispered choices. They had returned with nothing more than what they brought: a shoe, a note, a question. And yet, they each carried something deeper now, a sense that Hogwarts held more than lessons and ghosts and moving staircases. It held memory, and those memories, in turn, seemed to be watching them. After breakfast, they met near the large bay window on the 4th floor, the one that overlooked the lake and caught the sun just right. Luna's bag was slung across her shoulder, filled with sketchbooks and small trinkets. Neville held a small leather-bound notebook filled with scribbles from herbology, though today it would not be used for plants. "So," Luna asked, peering curiously at the corridor ahead, "shall we try again?" Neville hesitated. "You mean, look for more disappearing steps?" Luna nodded. "We don't have to chase them. But I'd like to listen again. The staircases are telling stories, Neville, and I don't think anyone's heard them in years." Neville adjusted his bag. "What if it's dangerous?" "They've been here for centuries," Luna said gently. "If they meant harm, we would have known." He considered that. "All right, but this time, let's take notes," Luna grinned. "Of course." The staircases love being written about, and so their gentle exploration began. They started in familiar places, the spiral stair outside the divination tower, where the steps sometimes squeaked even when no one was walking. Then the stone staircase near the library that occasionally added an extra step when students were in a hurry. Each time they approached, Luna closed her eyes, listening, not for sound, but for a hum in the air. A shift, a hesitation. Sometimes the steps shimmered, sometimes they did not. But every time they made a choice. In the long corridor near the History of Magic classroom, they found one more whisper of magic, a staircase whose bottom step glowed ever so faintly when Luna gently traced it with her wand. This time, however, they didn't follow it. They simply marked it in Neville's notebook, sketched the glow, and noted the time. "We don't need to chase every mystery," Luna said softly. "Some things want to be remembered quietly." Neville nodded. "Do you think anyone else notices?" "I think Professor McGonagall knows," Luna replied. "She once told me Hogwarts was older than most memory, and far wiser, but I don't think even she's been where we've been." At the entrance to the moving staircases, near the grand stairwell, they paused and sat for a while, watching the staircases shift gently above them. Other students passed by, laughing and chatting, never stopping to consider that the very ground they walked on might be listening. Luna pulled out her sketchbook and began drawing, not just the staircases themselves, but how they moved, the way they paused mid-air, rotated slowly as if waiting. Neville added notes beside her about the colors of the torches, the rhythm of movement, even the moments of stillness between changes. And then came the choice. Luna turned the page and began sketching something she hadn't seen yet, but hoped to find. A staircase with no destination, one that vanished halfway up. She looked at Neville. Would you follow it if it asked you to? He was quiet for a long moment. Only if you were going to, he said at last. Luna smiled. Good. I think the staircases are asking us something, not to solve them, not even to understand them, just to trust. Neville looked down at the sketch. What happens if we follow one and don't come back? We will, she said, one way or another. Hogwarts always brings its children home. The late morning sun drifted across the stone, casting soft shadows across their notes and drawings. Somewhere above them, a staircase turned, paused, and waited. Neville closed his notebook slowly. So, what's our next step? Luna didn't answer immediately. She stood, brushed her robes, and looked up at the web of staircases overhead. Then, with a quiet voice filled with certainty, she said, "We wait for the one that vanishes." It happened on a quiet Thursday evening, the kind of evening where the wind outside whispered low against the castle walls, and the lanterns in the hallways glowed a little softer than usual, their flames calm and unflickering, as though Hogwarts itself had taken a long, deep breath. Luna and Neville had not planned to explore that night. In fact, Neville had fallen asleep in the common room with a copy of Herbology and Hidden Doors open on his lap, and Luna had spent the last hour gently organizing the buttons and trinkets in her robe pocket, humming a slow lullaby she barely remembered learning. But then, the hum came. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling, familiar now. That gentle pull in the chest, the faint shimmer behind the eyes, the sense that something had shifted, not in the air, not in the castle, but in the story itself. Luna stood up at once. Neville blinked himself awake. Luna? She turned to him, her voice low and dreamy. It's time. He didn't need to ask. He stood and followed. They met at the entrance to the grand stairwell. It was empty, silent, save for the low creaks and mechanical sighs of the staircases shifting slowly above. For a while, they just stood together, watching, listening. And then they saw it, on the far right, past the 5th floor archway, and just above the old stone landing, one staircase blinked out of sight, not moved, not turned, vanished, a single, perfect disappearance. Neville's breath caught in his throat. It's the one, Luna nodded. Yes. They didn't speak again as they climbed toward it, floor by floor, stair by stair, until they reached the landing where the staircase had once stood. There was nothing there now, just a gap between platforms, the stone railing ending abruptly. But Luna didn't stop. She stepped forward with purpose, pausing just short of the edge. Then she held out her hand, not blindly, but gently, as though offering it to someone unseen. Neville held his breath. And slowly, as if accepting her invitation, the staircase returned. Piece by piece, step by step, it shimmered back into existence, glowing faintly silver under the moonlight filtering in from the high windows. But this time, it didn't connect to any known floor. It rose upward and curved into nothingness, a spiral of vanishing stone. "Are we ready?" Luna whispered. Neville looked into the unknown. "Do we need to be?" And with that, they stepped onto it. The moment their feet touched the staircase, the world around them shifted, not abruptly, not jarringly. It felt like slipping into a warm bath or stepping into a familiar dream. The stair beneath them pulsed gently with light, and each step they took forward unveiled the next, glowing, solid, patient. They climbed without speaking, up, and then higher still. The walls faded away, replaced by soft golden mist. There was no sky, no ceiling, just light. Then, at last, they reached the top. It wasn't a room. It wasn't even a place, really. It was a memory. They stood now in what looked like an echo of Hogwarts, but not as they knew it. The halls were younger, the stone less worn. The portraits on the walls were unfinished, their subjects blurry, as if not yet fully remembered, and before them stood a woman. She wore robes of soft silver. Her hair was pulled into a long braid streaked with gray and gold. She wasn't young, nor old. She stood with the weight of time in her posture, but smiled like someone who had waited only a moment. "Welcome," she said, her voice like parchment touched by candlelight. Neville instinctively reached for Luna's hand. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am one of the first," the woman said, "one of the early listeners." "Listeners?" Luna echoed. "Yes," the woman replied. "Long before staircases moved, long before portraits spoke or armor danced, Hogwarts was learning, not how to teach spells, but how to understand footsteps, the choices behind them." She turned and gestured to the space around them. "Every decision made in these halls, every hesitation, every turn, every pause at a step, Hogwarts remembers, not just to lead, but to guide." Neville frowned. "So the staircases, they don't shift randomly?" "No," the woman said. "They respond. Not to time, but to choice. They vanish when a path must wait. They return when someone is ready." "And the things they leave behind?" Luna asked softly. "Echoes," she said. "Traces of students who made a choice, but didn't yet understand it. Sometimes those choices grow old. Sometimes someone comes along to listen again." Neville looked around. "But why us?" The woman smiled gently. "Because you noticed. Because you listened, not with your eyes, but your heart." Luna stepped forward, a calm glow in her gaze. "And now?" The woman reached into her robe and pulled out a stone, small, round, with a faint spiral carved into its surface. She offered it to Luna. "Now, you are keepers. Gentle guides." Whisperers of stairs. Neville took a breath. "What do we do with it?" The woman smiled, and her form began to fade, slowly, peacefully. "You listen," she whispered, "and when a step disappears, you remember why." And just like that, the light faded, the staircase reappeared beneath them, and Luna and Neville found themselves standing back where they began, on the 5th floor landing, beneath the quiet eye of the high window, starlight spilling in once more. The staircase behind them had gone, but the stone remained in Luna's hand, smooth, warm, humming gently. And as they walked away, The castle around them sighed softly, content, perhaps, that someone was listening again. The days that followed drifted by like pages turned in a quiet book. Luna and Neville returned to their classes, to their routines, and to the gentle rhythm of life at Hogwarts. The great hall still filled with the warm clatter of spoons and laughter. Owls still soared across the rafters with parchment in their claws, and lessons resumed as though nothing had changed. And yet, for the two students who had followed the vanished stair, everything had changed, quietly, inwardly. They told no one of the glowing chamber in the clouds, no one of the woman in silver robes, nor of the memory orbs, or the floating relics of forgotten choices. Some stories, they decided, were meant to be held softly in the heart, not spoken aloud, like the sound of rain on castle glass, or the hush of moonlight slipping through the corridor. Neville carried the spiral stone in the deep pocket of his cloak, wrapped in a handkerchief stitched by Gran years ago. He didn't take it out often, but he could feel it there, always warm against his side, a reminder, a gentle promise. And Luna became a little quieter, not withdrawn, but thoughtful. She began sketching new staircases in her notebook, not the ones she'd seen, but the ones she imagined. Some led to libraries with floating books. Others vanished into meadows of stars. Each one curled and spun with a story only she could hear. They still met near the fourth-floor bay window most afternoons, letting the sunlight spill across their notes and drawings. Sometimes they watched the staircases move. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. One afternoon, as the shadows grew long across the castle floor, Neville asked, "Do you think the stairs will ever vanish again for us?" Luna looked up from her drawing. "Not in the same way. We've already followed the step that called us, but someday another one may disappear. For someone else? And if it does?" he asked. She smiled. "Then maybe we'll be the ones waiting on the other side." Neville chuckled quietly at the thought of himself offering mysterious stones to wide-eyed first years. But then again, maybe he wouldn't mind. Sometimes, as they walked the halls, they'd notice the seventh step again, the one that had vanished on the very first night. It remained perfectly still now, solid and reliable. But occasionally, just occasionally, it would shimmer. Not enough to vanish, just enough to say, "I remember you." And that was enough. The staircases continued their gentle turning, their silent watching, and Luna and Neville carried on, knowing now that Hogwarts was not simply built of stone and enchantments, but of choices, of moments held close, of paths hidden in plain sight, waiting only for someone curious enough to wonder, gentle enough to listen, and brave enough to follow. And as the wind curled once more around the towers, brushing through the ancient arches with a whisper, the castle seemed to hum contentedly. Its staircases had spoken, and someone had heard. And now, dear Sleepfellow, the staircases are still once more. The castle rests quietly beneath the velvet sky, its towers silhouetted against the stars, its windows aglow with soft candlelight. Somewhere, far above, the great hall's enchanted ceiling mirrors the night's calm beauty, and the tapestries along the corridors flutter ever so slightly with the hush of slumbered magic. Luna has tucked away her sketchbook, the last page filled with a spiral that never quite ends. Neville has slipped the spiral stone into a velvet pouch, kept close beside his herbology notes, not to be studied, but simply held. The staircases continue their slow, patient dance, shifting, pausing, vanishing, whispering quiet messages to those willing to notice. And perhaps, as you drift deeper into stillness, you might imagine yourself there too, sitting at the edge of a soft-lit landing, the castle gently breathing around you, and a staircase curling upward into the unknown. There is no rush, no danger, just the quiet wonder of a world that lives and listens. A place that understands your pauses, your hesitations, your dreams. Hogwarts, after all, has always been more than a school. It's a keeper of stories. And maybe, just maybe, it has kept a little room for yours. So let your thoughts grow slow and light, like mist rolling across the black lake. Let your breath match the soft rhythm of floating staircases and glowing runes. Let every worry slip away, one by one, like footsteps fading down a quiet hall. You are safe here, you are seen, and the steps will always wait for you. Good night, dear dreamer, and may your journey tonight be filled with soft stairways, spiral memories, and the quiet magic of choices gently made. Sleep well, sleep deep, and let the castle hold you.